Hi, I'm Klesi Mensch, and welcome to the second season of Womanhood from the Inside Out. In this interview series, we'll be discovering and uncovering the nature of womanhood from the inside out. Why is it important? When does it show? How can we identify it? And what are the implications of womanhood from the inside out? And today's guest is my dear friend, Lynn McCrite. Lynn is the owner and director of the Advancing Holistic Health Coaching Program. She is a board-certified health and wellness nurse coach and a clinical specialist in community health nursing. She began coaching more than 30 years ago after meeting Sydney Banks, teaching resilience in her private practice in Monterey. She later founded Health Consulting and Lynn McCrite Consulting, Texas. Lynn's nursing experience includes working as a medical surgical staff nurse, nursing education, public health, and as a supervisor in home health and hospice. Lynn leads the 3PGC Nursing Health Professions Community of Interest. Welcome, Lynn.
Oh, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show today. It's just
You,
wonderful to be here.
you are most welcome. And one of the questions that I really enjoy starting the show is, how did you first came across the inside out understanding of life?
Hmm. Well, in a very simple way, a very small way, it seemed, because it was such a long time ago. It was actually in 1980. So I had just moved from Europe, where we had lived for 2 years, back to the United States. And I had just started a new job, and a wonderful woman who is a dear friend still today told me that she thought I should meet Keith Blevins. And when she told me that, I knew immediately that I should meet Keith Blevins and that he was having gatherings at his farm home outside of town on Saturday afternoons. And so I found the directions how to get out there and drove out there by myself. My friend did not come. My friend has never come. And I started on an adventure that has enriched my life so much for over 35 years.
And that is beautiful. So I've met Keith Blevins once, actually live stream, not in person, but I was deeply impacted by his presence and by his understanding. So you went to Keith Blevins' house, and then what? Then what happened?
Well, that was really fun. In in 1980, he told me that doctor that that he would be going down to Florida to hear Sydney Banks speak, and that it might be the last time that Sydney speaks. So in 1980, I flew down there, and I was in an audience of about 400 people who were listening to Sydney Banks speak at the Mailman Center at the VA hospital in Miami, the same day that Joe Bailey and his wife met Sydney Banks. So it was just a huge opening for a lot of people who were new to the inside out way of looking at life. And I remember especially how in awe I was as I was standing behind Joe Bailey, and Joe Bailey was introducing himself to Sydney Banks. Sydney looked directly at Joe and said, "Joe, we have been waiting for you." It's just such a sweet memory. And I was just so in awe of Sydney's depth of understanding at that point in time. Joe, of course, had no idea how his life would unfold from that day forward. But it seemed to me that Sydney already knew. And I, in listening to the lecture that day, had never heard truth spoken to such a depth as I heard it on that day. So I had a couple of questions and comments that I shared with the audience and with Sydney that day, and I simply have never had another question since. And I had the opportunity to see Sydney in a lot of different areas around the country where he spoke, and even in Hawaii. I think I went a couple of times there to hear him. And my husband also came.
Mhm. And do you remember what sort of questions occurred to you in those first instances?
Well, I do. They were very specifically around my work. And at that time, I was working in the area of public health and with people who had relatively low incomes and lots of health problems. And I was able to share with him some experiences from my patients, because I have always seen in my patients an incredible resilience and an understanding that was something that they learned from life itself. And one of the things I've always appreciated about my profession in nursing has been that I, in a way, get to experience all of life through other people. So I have the opportunity to learn from them just as they have the opportunity for me to learn from me. And it's just become much greater opportunity now that I'm actually sharing the inside out understanding through coaching.
So, Lynn, and I'm quite curious about resilience because I do have a corporate background, and generally speaking, it's led to believe that we acquire resilience by developing almost mental toughness. There is a number of techniques and tools that we can apply to become more resilient. However, since I started looking to the inside out understanding of life, it appears to me that resilience comes in a different has a different take. So, would you mind to share with us what is your view of resilience? How do you perceive resilience? Where does it come from?
Well, it's actually the entire topic of my nurse coaching program. So thank you so much for asking. We are naturally resilient as human beings. And so that's how it's possible that I could learn from my patients just as they could learn from me. What we had in October of 2016 was the opportunity for our Three Principles Nursing and Health Professions group to host Dr. Keith Blevins and Joe Bailey at a pre-conference in the Three Principles Global Conference in Los Angeles. And I loved the title of their lecture. They described it as transforming the epidemic of burnout in healthcare, awakening the innate resilience of healers. So that's who we are. Those of us who are working in the area of healthcare, are quite literally, naturally healers. And awakening our own resilience will awaken the resilience of all of those we work with. It's not something that can be added. It absolutely is not a mental toughness. I know it's often spoken about, even within nursing circles, to have additional skills, additional techniques that need to be added to one to make them resilient. And that absolutely is not the way that it works. It works because we are naturally resilient within. And when we can tap into our own inner wisdom, as we can do every day, there is no barrier to what is happening in the world and our being able to respond and function at our highest level with our best internal wisdom. And you know, when I said that word, what I realized was, how could there be a best wisdom? I'm almost separating it out from, and I don't want to do that. Everything is one. Everything is a whole. There can't be a separation. There can't be two kinds of wisdom. There only is wisdom. There only is inner wisdom. And that inner wisdom comes to us in the moment, and it's what we see in the moment and what we share in the moment. Because what we see is actually the way that we create our life.
Thank you, thank you. And it's wonderful when you in a way when you spoke about the burnout that is happening in the mental health professionals and how about the innate resilience and how to open up the space to tap into that more fully.
It's not the mental health professionals alone. It is all health professionals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are at a point in our world today where people who care are being considered to be burdened and fatigued and having fatigue of their compassion even. So those are the various names that burnout goes by. We're not talking about small numbers here. I don't think that we have any numbers in nursing, but in physicians, for example, the numbers are hovering around 50%. So it's not a small thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that people go about, wow, I want to say tackling the problem, and that's not an easy thing to say because, of course, we know from the inside out, problems can't be tackled. That would be absolutely the opposite way to go about something. Finding our own inner wisdom is something that will change the way that we do healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thrilled with that opportunity because right now we have just started 5 years ago actually certifying nurse coaches, not just nationally but globally now.
Mm-hmm.
So when my school opened in June of 2016, I actually opened on 3 continents, in Japan, all the way across the US, and in Norway. Well, those people now are spreading within their communities the inside out understanding, because that's the only thing I teach in nurse coaching. All of the 5 other schools of nurse coaching teach techniques, and I only teach the understanding.
Yeah, I'm curious about your students. So first of all, how do your students find about your school usually?
Through 2 primary ways. Initially, we first of all, when I realized for myself that nurse coaching is the answer to the problems within my profession, I saw that I had to become certified as a nurse coach. And that realization came to me right after I had invited Keith Blevins to come and do a lecture to nurses in Texas. And in fact, that lecture can be found on his website today, threeprinciplesparadigm.com. But my path was that I had to become certified. So I was able to study with another school that already was in existence, obviously. And what was taught there were tools and techniques. But I already knew that I wasn't going to be teaching those tools and techniques, and that I would be coaching in exactly the same way that I did when I had my practice in 1986 in Monterey, California. And that was a very direct way of coaching, which assisted the other individual to find their inner wisdom at the same time that I found mine.
Mm.
So I was very fortunate to become certified in March. I did not wait the 3 months that were required between my application and taking the national exam to be certified. I simply did it and became certified in March and opened my school in June. So within 3 months, it had a very short period of time, and I think that that's because we know that this way of coaching needs to come to the nursing communities, and it will come to all licensed health professionals as well.
Mhm.
But we are in a position of trust with the public. There is a Gallup poll, which has been done every year, um, and since it started, for the last 15 years, nurses have been seen as the most ethical and the most honest professionals. So in that regard, we are considered to be the most trustworthy, and we touch lots and lots of people's lives all over the world every day. In fact, nursing is the largest healthcare profession worldwide. And in the United States alone, we have over 3 million nurses. So according to me, everybody either is a nurse, knows a nurse, or has a nurse. There isn't anyone in my life who hasn't talked to a nurse at some point.
Mhm.
And so in that regard, when I was working in my private practice in California, I saw what I could do in one local community. Because my area is public health, I see the community as my client.
Mhm.
But when I saw the larger picture, as Dr. Keith Blevins' presentation unfolded for us in the fall of October of 2015, I could see that this applied to all of nursing, and that in the same way that as Florence Nightingale had stood with her nurses facing the after effects of the battle in the Crimea, with hundreds of people injured and needing care. We are at that same place today. We are at the point where what people need most is the inside out understanding.
And a question that occurred to me for so someone that is watching this episode for the first time, and they maybe have read a book about that is talking about the inside out, and they are curious about really what does it mean? What does the inside out understanding means to you? How do you perceive it? Usually, how do you explain it?
Well, we can talk about mind as the energy of all things that is always there, uh, supporting us in the background. It has never had a beginning. It will never have an end. It is a constant. We can talk about uh, consciousness as the way that we as human beings are able to perceive. Consciousness itself is much, much larger, but the way that it comes into play in our lives is our perception of life. And we see life through that lens of consciousness. But it's only really thought that has any applicability for us. Mind and consciousness always will be there, and they always will exist and support us. But thought is our rudder. It's thought that we can use to navigate our way through life. Mm-hmm. So we have an opportunity to, I wanted to say make choices, and yet I'm not so sure that that's always true. We do know that thought is what creates not just our experience of life, but truly life itself. That is created through thought. And as human beings, we have free will. So we can we can choose to use that thought in ways that we want. But actually, most of our time is not spent actively thinking thoughts. More of our time is spent receiving.
Do you mean receiving thoughts?
Well, I suppose it could be described that way. This is certainly where words fail. I'm an American, and I have only the use of one language, although I have learned a little bit of another. I can't use it. Words can't hold this. There's such a depth of truth here, such a depth of universal understanding that anytime we try to speak about it, it seems to slip away.
Mm. The word that just occurred to me is that we spend most of our time receiving knowledge.
That's interesting. I love that word, knowledge. Florence Nightingale used that word, and when she wrote her preface to her most famous book, Notes on Nursing, What It Is and What It Is Not, she said that knowledge of nursing is knowledge that everyone ought to have of how to put a body into a state of health. Now, I had attended a conference in 2015, and at that time, I was told that Florence Nightingale had predicted 145 years ago that the practice of nursing would change completely in 150 years. So that year is 2020. Mm. And the way that it looks to me is that the practice of nursing will be teaching the inside out understanding.
Mm. And thank you, Lynn. One of the things that I remember that we had a conversation before the interview itself, so to get to know each other and to get an experience of connection before speaking with our audience together. And you did share with me that you came across so you've met Kit Blevins, and then you were introduced to Sydney Banks, so you had a few questions, and then a few years down the line you became your body became sick. So would you mind accounting how was your experience of you having an understanding of not or the knowledge of nursing coming across the inside out understanding where we are experiencing our thinking moment to moment to moment and dealing with your how would you describe it, unhealthy body at the stage? I don't know what would be how you would describe it. Yes, if you could give an account, that would be excellent, please.
Right. Oh, thanks so much. Well, I am so privileged to be back working within the three principles community
Hmm.
and the inside out understanding now, because I did have a period of absence of 23 years.
Mm.
And it was a very challenging time for me physically. And I also, at the same time, was raising my daughter. So I think that her her experience of childhood was very different because I spent a lot of time lying on the floor with her. I was too fatigued to do anything else,
Mm.
and it was fun because she just looked at me as completely normal. One of her friends came over one day and it saw me in my house coat at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and asked Emily, "Why is your mom still in her house coat?" And Emily simply said, "Oh, she always wears that." So for Emily, it was perfectly normal and perfectly fine, and that's just the way it was.
Mhm.
So nothing unusual in her life at all. Um, I missed a lot of school programs and piano recitals that I would have loved to have attended, but didn't have the opportunity to. So my husband had the responsibility of a lot of childcare, and it's been really fun to see him as he watches children in the community and identifies with the care of the parents. He knows exactly at what age they are and what the demands of parenting are at that point in time. And it's really sweet to watch because he's so open um, about children and what their needs are. For myself, I think there is an author within the principles community by the name of Alan Flood, Flood, who has experienced chronic illness and has written about it very beautifully. I can't recall the name of his book right now, but it is something that I haven't really written about yet, and maybe that's an opportunity that still awaits. Actually, now that I've said that, I realize in this moment that it is. I will be
Mm.
writing about that, and I hadn't realized that before. So that's the way that insights occur. They just occur in the moment,
Mhm.
and they occur all the time. My own sense of things is about that as we share our insights with each other and as we write about our insights, we will actually have um, the experience of heaven on earth. And we already have it, it's already here now, but we simply have to open our eyes to it. And every time we have an insight, it enriches us. And being able to share that with others enriches both of us, all of us, and that is a different way of living that we're on a trajectory right now toward living that way, and some of us are already living that way 100% of the time. One of the things that in nursing we're seeing right now is a big focus on what we describe as self-care. In other
Mm.
words, taking care of ourselves. And one of the reasons that the issue of burnout is so big in the health professions is that quite literally we haven't taken care of ourselves. We see just huge numbers of healthcare providers who apparently appear to sacrifice their own health to take care of others, and
Mm,
it's taking a huge toll. Now, what I realized the other day is that a lot of nurses specifically are looking at what do they need to do to take care of themselves and how to set a time aside to do that, to take care of themselves, and how to work it into their busy schedules. Wow. Now, when you look at it that way, it feels like a burden.
mhm.
But what I realized is it's just so simple. All we need to do is take care of ourselves all the time.
I really like that idea. And it's not just for nurses or someone in the caring profession. It's like usually being a woman, being a woman being, we tend to take too many roles taking care of other people. I know I do it, and I don't even have children, but I feel compelled to it. So learning to take time for myself is quite a new thing, is a learning experience. So when you say you can do that all the time or frequently, what do you mean?
You know, it comes down to being aware. I have a friend in Canada who simply asks herself, what does my body need now? It may be a drink of water. It may be that she forgot to eat. It may be that she needs to take a break or go for a walk. And that will present itself to us in the moment anytime we're willing to ask. And it doesn't have to be an asking in words. She uses those words, what does my body need now? But it's simply allowing ourselves a moment of awareness, a moment of listening. Maybe there will be an outside hint about what what needs to come next. Maybe the doorbell rings and there's someone there delivering a package. Well, we can choose in that moment how best to take care of ourselves. We can say, well, yeah, it's best for me to go answer the door. But another time, what's best is to continue on perhaps the project that we're working on. The package will still be there, or there'll be a note that's left on the door. And the same thing with a telephone. When the telephone rings, we don't have to answer on the first ring. We have probably most of us have it set up so we have at least 3 rings, and most of us have a voice message that we'll pick up after that. So we have the opportunity then to decide what is best for us. Is it best for us to continue the focus on what we're doing now, or is it best for us to to bring in the new focus of someone who's calling? And you know, it's fortunate that on our cell phones we now have the opportunity to see who is calling, and on our phones some of us have caller ID as well. But and those things can help. But when we listen inside, we will know whether or not to pick up that phone without knowing who's calling.
Thank you. And I really love that because it sounds very practical advice. One of the things that I do, I've got an iPhone. So if I'm working or I'm doing something that is important to me, I put on non-disturb mode. So if someone gets in contact, we'll go to the voicemail or whatever happens. I'll pick it up later. But that is my time. And it's having the actually I gave myself permission to put myself first, really. So, in that moment rather than being at the flow of whoever calls when I'm
Well,
doing what I'm doing. Yes.
you're very rare. Um, 89% of nursing in the United States is women.
Mm.
And in other parts of the country, the percentages are higher. So nursing is almost exclusively, not quite, almost exclusively a female occupation.
Mhm.
And in some countries, such as Rwanda, for example, they came to our national conference, our National Holistic Nursing Conference, and the profession of nursing is not well respected there. So they are in a process of essentially having to prove to their fellow man in that location their true value. So it can be different in different parts of the world. In the United States, we are the most trusted,
Mm.
but we would not be able to say the same at that location. Nevertheless, we are so close to life as women. We are the survivors, and we are the ones whose lives are currently extended the longest.
Mm.
And we have so many responsibilities for children, husbands, the community, our job, and so forth. Um, wow, what I'm seeing right now as we're talking is that as this catches on among health professionals, it's going to absolutely spread like wildfire
Mhm.
because we all touch so many other people's lives. Women traditionally care for others. That's true in every society. And I remember attending one conference and they were talking about the caregivers and how exhausted the family members were becoming taking care of someone in the family who was extremely ill for a long period of time. And I was able to simply suggest that the person who is the caregiver uh, sit with the client, the patient, and just take some deep breaths together. Just sit down and have a relaxing moment together where they could connect. And they could do that in the morning, they could do it in the evening, whenever it felt like the right time to do that. But what was important in the situation is the human relationship. And that loving human relationship is what feeds the caregiver and it feeds the patient at the same time. And we can't just always look at the caregiving situation as the caregiver doing something for the other. They have to be nourished themselves in
Mm.
order to continue. And too often that just hasn't been seen and valued.
Mhm.
There are major cultural differences in caregiving. Just for example, in the Hispanic community, the nurses say it in a kind of a funny way. They say, "We understand that you must put your family member before yourself, but we want to make sure that you take care of yourself too."
Mm.
So I'm not a party to that type of language. I don't have that in my culture. But I'm just saying this, I'm seeing it right now. We as healthcare providers are going to need to learn the language of the culture to be able to share what we're sharing because it's a foreign concept potentially to that segment of the community for the caregiver to take care of themselves first.
Mm. Mm.
We have a priority within holistic nursing, which is described as taking care of the nurse first.
Mm.
And that is not widely understood in the general nursing community, but it's one of our 3 top priorities in holistic nursing.
Mm. Mm. And it makes so much sense if naturally you need to take care of yourself first, otherwise you won't have anything else to give. And it's not sustainable. And I'm talking even from a perspective from the business world. If the leader is not taking care of themselves, they won't be there long.
Right, right. We give voice to
Mhm.
those words, but to actually live it from the inside out is our task now.
Mm.
Because wow, I've never said these words before, but nursing, I just saw it. Nursing is now embracing a much larger purpose than we have ever envisioned before.
Mhm.
We must. We must take care of ourselves first. And the way that the holistic nurses look at our 3 top priorities
Mhm.
is that we first of all take care of the patient, body, mind, and spirit, take care of the patient as a whole.
Mhm.
Well, so then if our other major tenet is to take care of the nurse first, how do we do that? How do we take care of the nurse first? Well, the answer is in the very first tenet, which is taking care of the patient. In other words, taking care of the nurse as a whole, body, mind, and spirit.
Mhm.
And it's an idea that is given voice, but not, it's just beginning to be really understood
Mm.
by the profession as a whole.
And something that just occurred to me based on your personal experience, you were in a very special position of experiencing the life as a caregiver, being a nurse, but then you had your own long-term illness, so you also experienced from a perspective of the patient at the same time being a nurse. So it's almost not almost. I actually see it full circle. So you got to experience both positions as the patient and the nurse.
It's really true. I have to laugh about the way that that came about. I had been told I mean, right away when I became ill, that I might be ill as long as 5 years. So when the 5-year time frame was up, I said, okay, I'm going back to school. And I elected to enter a PhD program in nursing. I wanted to be a doctor of nursing. And it's becoming much more popular now. I had to elect a topic within my nursing program. And what would my topic be? So the only thing that I have ever been interested in professionally is just one word. And it's the reason that I studied in my master's program the field of public health. And it really is the reason that I re-entered professional education and um, was beginning to seek a PhD. My goal always has been to understand health. So that was my dissertation topic. That simple one word, health, Health. Well, the faculty on the school could hardly believe it because it's such a global topic. I mean, how could one begin to write about health when it's such a large concept? And yet we had definitions of health. We had the World Health definition of health and other nurses have identified their definitions of health, and mostly it's based on function, whether a person can do their activities that they want to do. But immediately it seemed, upon announcing to the world of my profession that that was my topic, I suddenly completely lost my health again, in when we view health in terms of how people function day to day with their physical body. And I actually had the opportunity at one point to write a little haiku poem about that, and it simply said, in 17 syllables as a Japanese verse, "On my way to understanding health, I have fallen very ill." So that was my way of learning. Health knew that I could not understand health learning it in school. It wasn't an academic exercise. That if I truly wanted to understand health, I would have to learn it from the inside out. I'm still learning. So I wrote a second verse on that little haiku, and it said that time out for chronic fatigue. Studies in nursing must wait. I could not have imagined that when studies in nursing came back to me, that I would be the teacher, and that I would have my own school, and that I would be teaching health professionals how to coach from the inside out.
Wow, that's so powerful. Lynn, I feel that we are coming to a conclusion for today's episode. So how can people find you? How can people reach to you?
Well, my website is 3 great big long words, so I'll just say them and then spell it. My goal is to bring all of healthcare into holism, into the inside out understanding. So I call myself, my school, Advancing, ADVANCING. The second word is holistic, HOLISTIC. And the third word is health, HEALTH. Most of my contacts have come through the 3 principles global community, through the Glasswing community, and also through the Holistic Nursing Association.
Wonderful, thank you. For me, if you would like to reach me, you can go directly to my website. So that would be www.clesiamensch.com, and I'll spell that. So that would be www.clesiamendes. Or if you prefer, you can find me on Facebook. So that would be facebook.com/clesia.mendes. And Lynn, what would be your parting thoughts for our audience today?
Wow, just embrace the world, that we have an understanding that can be shared in such an easy way. Every time we walk out the door, we really are a I wanted to say walking sermon, and yet that can't be right, because it's so much broader than that. But we don't have to share in any kind of professional or the way of teachers and students. Simply being ourselves, being our natural selves in our natural surroundings is actually what will be the deciding factor in how rapidly the world embraces the inside out understanding.
That's wonderful. Lynn, thank you very much for your time and being with us today. To our audience, we'll be back next week with another episode of Womanhood from the Inside Out. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Okay.